Morning, everybody. Welcome. If you're here. Anyway, so let's just get on with it. Right. So we get now today to one of the key moments in the book of Isaiah, and it's the call of Isaiah, which is in Isaiah chapter 6. This is one of the most famous parts of it, really. In fact, I guess most people who know anything about Isaiah, which is not most people, because not many people do know a lot about Isaiah. I mean, I didn't know much until I started reading myself. But anyway, most people will go, yeah, the call in the temple. That's the kind of moment. But what's unusual about that is that it doesn't happen at the start of the book, because normally in any book, narrative, story, or textbook, it starts at the very beginning, doesn't it? It says, "Here we are." I know novels nowadays tend to start a bit later, don't they, sometimes, and then they kind of feed back how did we get to this point. But certainly historically that was never the case. People used to write books in a certain way. There are cultural ways of doing this sort of stuff. So it was quite unusual that the book of Isaiah starts and then it talks about its call. So last week, if you were here last week, we talked about, if not, why not catch up with it on the catch up thing. Last week we heard about the scene setting, and the scene setting, God says this is what's going on. There are things that aren't right, and also in the scene setting, God says this is what's going to happen, and it's not good. What's going to happen? So Isaiah opens with this, why, it's not going to be good. And then we get this big word coming up now. This is a big theological word coming up. We get this theophany. And a theophany is a revelation of God, isn't it? This vision that Isaiah gets of this. This sounds really, really fancy, doesn't it? You get a theophany of the thrice holy God. It's good, isn't it? Which is classic kind of Isaiah stuff. And that's the kind of language you would want to use for Isaiah. Is that a Wesley hymn that God is in his temple? For me, I think that's a classic. Play that afterwards, will you? On the way out, I should have played it. God is in his temple is a classic, kind of this big majestic hymn, and there's smoke and fire and booming going on. It's great, and that's the kind of vibe we're looking for. So get that vibe going, and I'll read it for you if I can find it. Isaiah 6. This is in the Message, so it might be slightly out of the ordinary. Yes? Right. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Master sitting on a throne, high and exalted, and the train of his robes filled the temple. Angels, seraphs hovered above him, each with 6 wings, and with 2 wings they covered their faces, with 2 their feet, and with 2 they flew. And they called back and forth, one to the other, "Holy, holy, holy is the God of the angel armies. His bright glory fills the whole earth." The foundations trembled at the sound of the angel voices, and then the whole house filled with smoke. And I said, "Doom, it's doomsday. I'm as good as dead. Every word I've ever spoken is tainted, blasphemous even. And the people I live with talk the same way, using words that corrupt and desecrate. And here I've looked God in the face, the King, the God of the angel armies." Then one of the angel seraphs flew to me. He held a live coal that he'd taken with tongs from the altar. He touched my mouth with the coal and said, "Look, this coal has touched your lips. Gone your guilt, your sin wiped out." And then I heard the voice of the Master, "Whom shall I send? Who will go for us?" I spoke up. "I'll go. Send me." He said, "Go and tell this people, listen hard, but you're not going to get it. Look hard, but you won't catch it. Make these people blockheads with fingers in their ears and blindfolds on their eyes, so they won't see a thing, won't hear a word. They won't have a clue about what's going on, and yes, they won't turn around and be made whole." Astonished, I said, "Master, how long will this go on?" He said, "Until the cities are emptied out, not a soul left in the cities. Houses empty of people, countryside empty of people. Until I, God, get rid of everyone, sending them off the land totally. And even if some should survive, say a tenth, the devastation will start again. The country will look like a pine and oak forest with every tree cut down. Every tree a stump, a huge field of stumps. But there's a holy seed in those stumps. Ooh, it's good, isn't it? That's the Message translation, so it's not the kind of the traditional wordage, which I will refer to as we think about it a bit. So this holy, holy, holy cry that you get from the seraphim echoes through the Bible from here, right? It echoes all the way through till the book of Revelation, when time kind of gets sorted out. The skies roll up like a scroll. God steps in, and that echo again comes through from the heavens, holy, holy, holy. So it's as though that's the eternal cry, the thrice holy God. Now, we looked at this section last year when we were doing the angels, because you have these seraph angels surrounding the throne of God. They're impressive creatures, fiery and serpent-like, with 6 wings. And they appear here, and as I said, they appear also in the book of Revelation. I think that's only 2 times they appear, because the Bible isn't big on the angel stuff. I mean, it mentions them, but they're none of our business particularly. So they pop up here and they pop up at the end of time. And in the book of Revelation, they've got the 4 different faces, haven't they? A cat, a head of a bull, head of a human, head of an eagle, head of a lion in the book of Revelation. So they're these mystical, heavenly, pan-dimensional beings. And this is a vision here that we just heard of the heavenly throne room. How do you describe the awesome, indescribable God? How can you know the unknowable? You can only use words that don't make any sense, that overlay. Well, it looked like this, but it was also that. You know, they had one face, but they had 4 faces. They were flying, but they were covering their faces. It's kind of, it doesn't match, because we can only work within the dimensions we know. So Isaiah has this vision, and part of the interesting thing I find with this is that this heavenly vision is rooted in the earthly experience. The earthly temple that was built at this point is like an echo. It's like a shadow, like a reflection of the heavenly throne room. God is in his temple, and he's high and he's exalted, and his glory fills it. His robe fills the whole of the temple. The angels fly and cry out, and the foundations of the temple are rocked with this overwhelming experience of God being in this place. It's as though earth cannot contain this. Earth's trying to say this is a bit what heaven's like, but it can't do it. It's shaken to its core. And it's not scary in a, oh no, a bear's going to eat me kind of a way. It's scary, like I'm going to implode and burn up at the awesomeness of everything. That's Isaiah's experience. He's not scared I'm going to die. Oh no, this is horrible. It's like, I don't know what's going on. It's this overwhelming experience. And I kind of like that. I like that worship can do that. And I suppose this is partly what I miss from not gathering for worship. There's something about the presence of God in the temple, isn't there? The music and the prayers and the presence of God and others there. And I'm missing that kind of awesome presence of God when we worship together. It's hard to experience on your own. And now, as we're kind of, I guess, as God's people, we're in the wilderness, aren't we? We haven't got those home comforts, those things that we can return to, those things that we knew. We're kind of all right. So we can't experience that in the same way. But that is one of the differences, I think, between people. Some love and experience regularly that mystical encounter, don't they? They burn with a fire. You see them sometimes at worship or in worship times, and they're lost in the wonder of it all, aren't they? As though they've kind of been taken away somewhere else. But not everyone experiences worship like that. For a lot of us, a lot of people, it's a far more kind of ordinary experience, and that kind of experience is quite rare. For some people, God, the reality of God is in that kind of everyday, the nuts and bolts of life, the routine of God, or the routine of life, and God is in that. And the truth, as you can imagine, is both and bigger than both. Because there are times when we kind of need that ecstatic experience. But we also need that kind of God with his sleeves rolled up and mud under his fingernails in the reality of life. Now, I sometimes wish I was more touchy-feely type of worship person, but it is rare for me. It has happened a few times. I've talked about it before, and if you ask me, I'll talk about it again. When I was doing some driving for a guy called Chris Duffett, and they did there was these musicians that played around. They stood around you and played tunes, and it was a mystical experience for me. That was, but it's very rare for me to have that kind of thing. But the danger of that, and there's dangers in every sort, every approach, is that you just seek the experience. You know, just want the experience. I don't want to let it change me. Get the experience, feel topped up, carry on the way I did before. Just enjoy a good concert and then go home. But our faith needs depth and it needs challenge. It needs our mind as well as our passion. And the danger of, I guess, the way I work is that things can get a bit dry. You know, well, let's sort out some practical steps in order to express what we believe. You know, all right, a bit boring, but yeah, all right then. So it's kind of, you need a bit of both. You need a bit of fire, but you also need a bit of a framework to make sure the fire works to its maximum potential. Again, sounds boring again, doesn't it? So there is that balance, isn't there? But the ecstatic, there's something about it. For some people, that's their main kind of source of spiritual food. For other people, their source of spiritual food is different. But this is Isaiah having this weird, ecstatic experience of God. He's caught up, he's burned up with the awesome, overpowering presence of God, burning with the fire of God's presence. It's amazing when you think about it. But the thing is, it's rooted in this reality. The vision is in the temple. There's a connection between the two. And if we have the eyes to see it, if we take the time, if we are open to the experience, I think we can. I know we can. I have experienced that awesomeness of God in the reality of this. Wonky pictures and all. Now we're going to skip the burning coal, because after he has this kind of whoa, angels and fire and smoke and wings and God and everything. Yes, that thing with the coal. We'll come back to that in a moment. Because the connection between heaven and earth, this openness to God, brings us over to verse 10, which is that the experience is for a reason. It's not just for a good time. It's not just to make us feel good. We have a message. And verse 10 is a bit strange, because it says, make the hearts of these people stubborn, plug up their ears and close their eyes. Otherwise they might see with their eyes, they might hear with their ears, they might understand, and they might turn to me and be healed. It seems strange to talk about how people will refuse to listen. They don't want to change. But the reality is, that is what we're like. We do harden our hearts, don't we? Or we easily do. Things hurt us and we shut down. People let us down, so we stop trusting them. Our hearts harden so easily, and justifiably so. But that's not our way. Not if we want to be healed. Not if we want to be truly alive. So coming up here for the people of Judah, and as some of us have experienced, sometimes where there is desolation, it's followed by a time of healing. And this desolation isn't sent by God to teach us a lesson, I don't think. It is sometimes our fault. And I guess, if you think about people who are on a journey back from addiction, they can see that there was that desolation. But there's a journey back and healing can be found. The people of Judah had turned from God. They'd put their trust elsewhere. They turned to murder and injustice, which is what we read last week. Things were about to fall apart. There are consequences. And we can complain all we like, and we can say it's not fair all we like, but the truth is, there are consequences. And the innocent suffer those consequences as much as the guilty, sometimes more. So it's not good news. But remember, we're still in the doom part of the book of Isaiah. Things look up later. But it's not good news at this point. And Jesus also talks about how people just won't listen. In fact, he quotes in Matthew 13, if you want to check it later. In Matthew 13, Jesus quotes Isaiah and says how the people don't want to hear it. They don't want to turn. It's almost like they don't want to be healed. And that doesn't mean that God deselects people. It means that some people don't want it. And God will not force his love on someone who doesn't want it. The message is there for those that want to hear it. But if you don't, that's fine. Scroll on by. And what is the message? It is turn and be healed. Turn from the destruction that we so often face and be healed of the desolation that we experience. After the cities are ruined and empty, the houses uninhabited, the land becomes a desolate waste. Even the little we have left is destroyed, like a tree cut down to the ground. Even from that, when life feels it's gone that bad, and you think, I'm just clinging on, and then that goes as well. Even from that, says Isaiah, a new beginning can be found. That's the message. That's the message we carry. However bad it gets, all is not lost. If only we can turn and be healed. And this is actually, in my amateur opinion, the message of modern counselling. The language is very different, but the wisdom and the truth remains. That there's always a way through. Whatever happens, all is not lost. We acknowledge the loss and the pain and the causes and the consequences. Yeah, we don't pretend. But know this. Even at this start of a terrible time that was about to hit the people here, know this. Nothing is ever beyond hope. And it's echoed a bit later, or is it earlier, with the prophet Habakkuk. It's a good name, that, isn't it? Habakkuk. Who wrote roughly about this time. He says, though the fig tree doesn't bud and there are no grapes on the vines, though the olive crop fails and the fields produce no food, though there are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord God. I will be joyful in God my Saviour. The sovereign Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer, and he enables me to tread on the heights. Doom is coming, but it's not the end of the story. So let's just jump back to the middle part of that, which is where I think Isaiah reaches in and touches us. How terrible it is for me, I cried. I'm about to be destroyed. My mouth speaks sinful words, and I live among people who speak sinful words. Now I've seen the King with my own eyes. He's the Lord who rules over all. A seraphim, flew over me. He was holding a hot coal. He'd used tongs to take it from the altar. He touched my mouth with the coal, and he said, "This has touched your lips. Your guilt has been taken away. Your sin has been paid for." Then I heard the voice of the Lord. He said, "Who will I send? Who will go for us?" And I said, "Here I am. Send me." God is the awesome other. We just melt like wax, like opening the door to a nuclear furnace. I don't know if they've got doors. If they have, you probably shouldn't put one in for health and safety reasons. But if a nuclear furnace had a door and you just opened it, it's like driving too close to the sun. In the light of God, we are just grimy, hopeless nothing. And this isn't a low self-esteem thing. We've all felt it. You know when you're a fan of a superstar or a singer or an actor or something, or someone that you love, and they don't know you love them, and then you meet them and you're all tongue-tied and awkward. When you meet someone who's got a brain the size of a planet and you just think, I'm just stupid, aren't I? I don't know anything. This person knows everything. Or you just meet someone who is just fabulous and you're like, oh, look at me. We all know what that's like. Imagine that, though. I'm not one for putting people on pedestals, as you well know. But that's the feeling that we've all had. So this is really about perspective on ourselves. Now, if God formed the universe, if God threw the stars into the sky and then just arranged them into those constellations, put that there. If God struck a match and lit the sun, if God took all those weird little creatures that he made, like that, the anglerfish and stuff, and put them right down in the bottom of the ocean, like that. If that's God, we do need a bit of a reality check on ourselves and our own egos. Because in the face of immense, immense goodness, we do feel guilty. And in front of immense, immense grace, we kind of realise how ungenerous we often are. And in front of this immense, immense love, we look at the love that we have and we feel, well, that's actually a bit cold. It's not unusual. It's about these moments we get caught in the light, isn't it? And see ourselves in reality, the truth of what we are, which is flawed, riddled with prejudices and doubts and envies. We are selfish and we are self-seeking. We are. And this isn't a guilt trip. It's a simple fact. And what's important is what we do with that fact. Now, we could curl up and punish ourselves and go, oh, I'm a terrible human, oh. Or we can go, no, I'm not, I'm fab. And we just kind of puff ourselves up and say, I'm better than that, I'm better than you, and all this kind of stuff. We could say, I'm so terrible, and so is everyone else, and nothing matters. We could. But what does God do when God sees us for what we are? Does he point at our inadequacies? Does he have a laugh with the angels? Look what they're doing now. Does he rage at how useless we are? God looks at us from his power and his goodness and his perfection. And he forgives us. And more, he makes us worthy. Worthy to bear his name, to carry his message, to live the life that he's gifted us. God, the other, the objective, one outside of ourselves, outside of our parents and that critical voice in our head. God, the expert on perfection and power, God looks at us and says, you are worthy. So don't let the guilt and the finger pointers, which I'm doing right now, tell you that you're not. You are worthy. And not because you're fabulous and flawless and all that. I mean, you're pretty good, but you're not fabulous and flawless. All right, you might be fabulous, but you're not flawless. But you are worthy. Not because you're flawless, so let's be real, but you're worthy because you are loved by God. You are worth God's love. And it's a beautiful thing. After all the smoke and the fire and the fiery serpents and the wings and the robe filling the temple, billowing out, all that going on, the message of doom and desolation, and no one's ever going to listen. After all that, know this: you are loved and worthy. You, with your flaws and your prejudices and your doubts and your envies and your selfishness and your self-seeking. Me, with all that too. You've been touched by holy fire and you're clean. So it's a powerful message. There's work to be done, yes. But Isaiah lays the groundwork. Things aren't right, but God is. All powerful, all holy. God calls Isaiah. God calls us. God calls you. To hear his voice, to be put right by him, to share his message of hope and healing. It's a mystical calling, however you understand these things. Next time perhaps we'll think a bit about, well, what does that mean then? How do I live that calling out? How do I take the responsibility of that calling? But for now, just for now, for this week, just go and share a bit of heaven, a bit of this vision of God with those that you meet. Amen. So you know, I hadn't noticed. Is that bad? Well, if I hadn't done that, some of you would have been sat there for the whole hour going, it's, do you know what? In real life, that is now wonky. It's because of the camera. Let me show you. If you do it full on, because the camera, you know, the camera skews things. That's not straight in real life. That is so weird. Because it looks straight there. That is weird. I'm going to take a picture of that and I'll put it on the Facebook page afterwards. Here's the mystery then, that now the picture looks straight to everyone, doesn't it? Let me get this sorted out. See, that's what it actually looks like in real life now. Can you see that that's wonky? That's not right, is it? Look. Oh, yeah. It looks perfectly straight. That is so weird. I don't know if you can see that. I'll stick that on the Facebook page. Oh, I'm being freaked out now. Here we are. 2 Samuel 21. I know they're dropping like flies now. I'm just at the padding stage of the morning. 2 Samuel 21 from verse 19. In another battle against the Philistines at Gob. Now that's a good place name, isn't it? Gob. Oh no, you already found it. Yeah, you're ahead of me there. Sorry, Aaron. I've just found it. I didn't see. Yeah. Elhanan killed Goliath's brother. Elhanan was the son of Jarah-Oregim. God, they're not making this easy, are they? Of Jarah-Oregim from Bethlehem. Goliath was from the city of Gath, and his spear was as big as a weaver's rod. There was still another battle. It took place at Gath. A huge man lived there. He had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. So the total number of his toes and fingers was 24. I like the way the Bible points that out for those of us that are mathematically challenged. He was from the family of Rapha. He made fun of Israel, so Jonathan killed him. Jonathan was the son of David's brother Shimea. Those 4 Philistine men lived in Gath. They were from the family line of Rapha. David and his men killed them. There you go. That's my contribution to the. Well, let me do the thing. Let me do the thing to the Project Weird. Yes, that is there, isn't it? Is that with the bears? Notices about the story of Elijah cursing the children who call him a baldy. That's a favourite story of late middle-aged men. That one. I can relate to that. Yeah, because they get torn apart by bears later on, don't they? Yeah. I don't quite know. I don't think I've ever preached on that one. That's one of those stories that you just think that's interesting and colourful background. I don't know what I'd do with it.